The distress beacon tore through space like a dying scream, its alien frequencies crackling with raw, unfiltered terror that made the hull of the research vessel Starbound vibrate with dread. Captain Maya Rodriguez felt her blood turn to ice. As she gripped the command chair, her knuckles white against the cold metal. The translation matrix worked frantically, symbols and strange languages flowing across her screen like digital tears. "Dear God, ... she whispered, her brown eyes widening in absolute horror as the words finally made sense. "It's the Galactic Council. They're actually begging for help from us. But here's the thing about desperate times. They make enemies into allies faster than you can say intergalactic war crimes." The message hit her like a freight train loaded with nightmares. The monstrous void swarm had devoured entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space where billions of lives once thrived. Advanced civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia now lay in smoking ruins, their greatest fleets reduced to cosmic dust. And in their desperation, the Council had done something they swore they'd never do. They'd reached out to the humans of Earth. Maya's hands trembled as she read the casualty reports. 17 star systems gone. Just ... gone. The Andorian Empire wiped out in 6 hours. The crystal cities of Vega Prime shattered into glittering fragments. Even the mighty Galactic Defense Force, with their energy shields that could stop supernovas, had been crushed like insects under the swarm's relentless advance. "Captain," her communications officer Jake Williams suddenly shouted from across the bridge, his young face pale with excitement and fear. His fingers danced across his console like a pianist playing a death march. "The human fleet. Holy hell, they're already mobilizing." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, after decades of being branded as savage Deathworlders and quarantined. From polite galactic society like rabid dogs, humanity's moment had finally arrived. The same species that the Council had locked away behind warning beacons and extreme danger signs were now their last hope. Isn't it funny how quickly barbaric monsters become valued allies when your perfect little civilization starts burning? "Shh," Maya commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting in her chest. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the most terrifying and beautiful sight she'd ever witnessed. The assembled might of Earth's combined fleet rising from the depths of Sol, system-like metallic angels of death. The EU's retribution led the charge, its massive bulk bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Behind it came wave after wave of human warships, destroyers, carriers, battle cruisers, and experimental vessels that most civilized species would consider war crimes given physical form. They moved with predatory grace, their formations speaking of countless wars fought in the darkness between stars. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, depending on which side you're on. Maya watched in awe as Admiral Marcus Stone's face appeared on her screen, his scarred features carved from granite. And fury. This was a man who'd survived the Titan Wars, the Lunar Rebellion, and the hellish siege of Mars Colony. His cold blue eyes had seen entire worlds burn, and he'd slept peacefully afterward. "Captain Rodriguez," Stone's voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded fleets through the fires of hell. "I trust you've received the Council's interesting request for assistance." Irony was so thick you could cut it with a plasma blade. The same aliens who'd spent centuries calling humans too violent for civilized space were now begging those same humans to unleash that violence on their behalf. Admiral Maya replied, fighting to keep her voice professional while her mind reeled. "The casualties. Sir, they're requesting immediate military intervention. The Void Swarm has broken through every defense line. They're saying it's extinction-level threat." Stone's expression didn't change, but Maya caught the flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. Something that made her grateful she was on humanity's side. "Captain, patch me through to High Command. It's time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders do when someone threatens our neighbors." "Our neighbors," Maya almost laughed. These were the same neighbors who'd built quarantine barriers around Earth and posted warnings about humanity's uncontrolled aggression and dangerously adaptive nature. The same species who'd trembled at human diplomatic missions and insisted Unarmed escorts whenever humans entered their space. The communication channel crackled as more human ships joined the formation. Captain Emma Parker's voice came through from the destroyer US Thunder, her tone sharp with barely controlled rage. "Admiral, are we really doing this? Are we really going to save the same bastards who called us monsters?" There was a pause that stretched across the void like a held breath. When Stone finally answered, his words carried the weight of destiny. "Captain Parker, monsters are exactly what this situation requires. The Council is about to learn why Earth produces the galaxy's finest killers, and why those killers choose who lives and who dies." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The human fleet was moving now, their engines burning bright against the starfield like the eyes of hunting predators. Every ship represented humanity's greatest gift and greatest curse, their absolute refusal to surrender, no matter the odds. But here's what nobody saw coming. Not the Council, not the Void Swarm, and certainly not Maya herself. As she watched the human armada disappear into hyperspace, she realized this wasn't just about saving the galaxy. This was about proving that sometimes the monsters under your bed are the only thing standing between you and something infinitely worse. The question that made her blood run cold wasn't whether humanity could stop the Void Swarm. The question was, what would happen to the galaxy when the most dangerous species in known space finally showed everyone exactly why they'd earned that title? And somewhere in the depths of space, the Void Swarm continued its relentless advance, unaware that it was about to meet the children of Earth and learn why even nightmares had nightmares about Deathworlders. Admiral Marcus Stone stood in the war room like a monument to human brutality. His scarred face carved from decades of combat and illuminated by the hellish glow of tactical displays showing devastated worlds. The holographic images painted a picture that would haunt lesser species for generations, and sever star systems reduced to cosmic graveyards. Billions of lives snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. Around the circular table sat Earth's deadliest predators, battle-hardened veterans who'd survived humanity's bloodiest conflicts and lived to tell the tale. These weren't your typical military officers, sipping coffee and discussing strategy. These were apex killers forged in the fires of humanity's most savage wars. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stone began, his voice carrying the cold fury of a predator sizing up wounded prey. "The same aliens who branded us too dangerous for galactic society are now crying for our help like children in a nightmare." The irony hung in the air, thicker than smoke from a burning battlefield. Commander Emma Parker of the destroyer US Thunder slammed her fist on the holographic table with enough force to make lesser beings jump. Her green eyes blazed with the kind of anger that had once leveled entire cities during the Mars Rebellion. They sat in their crystal towers for centuries, watching us fight and die on our hellish world, calling us monsters and savages. Now, they want their monsters unleashed. But here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes monsters are exactly what the universe needs. Colonel James Mitchell, the grizzled commander who'd survived the infamous siege of Europa Station, leaned back in his chair with a bitter laugh that could freeze plasma. "Remember when they posted those warning beacons around our solar system? Quarantine zone? Dangerous species approach with extreme caution?" His weathered hands gestured at the tactical displays. "Looks like extreme caution just became extreme desperation." The room erupted in dark chuckles that sounded more like wolves preparing to hunt. These warriors had spent their entire careers being treated like rabid animals that needed to be caged. Every diplomatic mission had required armed escorts. Every trade negotiation had been conducted behind energy barriers. The galactic community had made it crystal clear humans were tolerated, not welcomed. Stone raised his hand, and the room fell silent with military precision. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of destiny and the promise of violence. "The Void Swarm has broken through 17 defensive lines in 6 standard days. They've consumed the Andorian Empire, shattered the crystal cities of Vega Prime, got defense force into cosmic dust." Captain Sarah Thompson, whose cybernetic eye glowed red in the dim light, studied the casualty reports with professional detachment. She'd lost her natural eye during the brutal Battle of Titan. where human forces had held off a superior alien fleet using nothing but raw determination and creative violence. Admiral, the numbers don't lie. We're looking at extinction level. Losses. The Council's best estimates put total casualties at over 200 billion sentient beings. 200 billion. The number hit the room like a physical blow. But wait, here's the part that would make your blood run cold. The Void Swarm wasn't just killing these civilizations. They were consuming them, absorbing their knowledge, their technology, their very essence into their collective consciousness. Every victory made them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. What exactly are we dealing with here? Asked Commander David Chen, his fingers dancing across his datapad as he analyzed enemy movement. Patterns. Chen had earned his reputation during the underground wars on Earth, where human ingenuity had turned sewer systems into death traps for occupying forces. Stone's expression darkened as he manipulated the holographic display, showing the swarms. Relentless advance across the galaxy like a spreading infection. Intelligence reports describe them as living darkness entities that exist partially outside our reality. They phase through traditional defenses, absorb energy weapons, and adapt. 2 new threats within hours. The Council's most advanced AI systems can't even predict their movement patterns. The room fell silent as that information sank in. These weren't just another alien threat. This was something that defied the very laws of physics that governed. Civilized warfare. Commander Parker's voice cut through the tension like a plasma blade.
Ow!
So let me get this straight. The same species that called us unpredictably violent and dangerously creative now want us to be unpredictably violent and dangerously creative on their behalf? Stone's scarred lips twisted into something that might have been a smile if you didn't look too closely. Emma, they're about to learn why Earth produces the galaxy's most effective killers, and why those killers have spent their entire existence finding new ways to survive against impossible odds. But here's the twist nobody saw coming, not even Stone himself. The Admiral touched a control. A new tactical displays materialized, showing human fleet positions throughout known space. What the Council didn't realize was that humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario for decades. Every quarantine barrier, every diplomatic slight, every warning beacon had only served to make humans more determined to prove their worth through violence. Gentlemen and ladies, Stone continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow commanded more attention than any shout. We've spent 50 years being told we're too dangerous for polite society, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Willing to sacrifice everything for victory, he paused, letting his words sink in like poison into an enemy's bloodstream. Today we discover if they were right. Colonel Mitchell stood up, his massive frame casting shadows across the tactical displays. Admiral, what are our rules of engagement? Are we playing by their civilized warfare conventions? Or are we doing this the human way? The question hung in the air like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. Everyone in that room knew the difference between civilized warfare and the human way of fighting. Civilized species fought with honor, following established protocols and minimizing casualties. Humans fought to win, period. No rules, no mercy. No survivors, if that's what victory required. Stone's expression turned deadly as winter on Europa. The Void Swarm threatens all life in this galaxy. If they devour every civilization, Earth dies alone in the darkness. He looked around the table, meeting each commander's eyes with the intensity of a man who'd seen hell and decided to make it his permanent address. We deploy in 4 hours. Show the galaxy what Deathworlders do best. We survive, and we make our enemies wish they'd never been born. The room exploded into motion as commanders rushed to their ships. But one question lingered in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Would unleashing humanity's full military might save the galaxy? Or would the cure prove worse than the disease? Time would tell if the monsters under the galactic community's bed were about to become their salvation or their doom. The human armada materialized at the edge of Council space like death itself, had decided to take physical form and go shopping for enemies. Reality twisted and buckled as hundreds of warships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, their emergence tearing holes in the fabric of space-time that made veteran navigators weep with terror. Massive battleships bristling with enough weapons of mass destruction to crack moons. Sleek destroyers armed with planet killers that could turn entire worlds into radioactive dust. And carrier vessels loaded with fighters designed for one purpose total: annihilation of anything stupid enough to get in their way. The sight would have been beautiful if it wasn't so absolutely terrifying. "Hi, Chancellor." Vextai's 3 hearts hammered against his ribcage, like trapped animals trying to escape as he watched the tactical display from the safety of the Council's command center. His species, the Zilani, had evolved on a peaceful garden world where the most dangerous predator was a creature roughly equivalent to an angry butterfly. Nothing in their evolutionary history had prepared them for this moment, watching apex predators from humanities. Nightmare Planet arranged themselves into formations. That spoke of countless wars and merciless efficiency. "By the eternal void," whispered his military advisor, General Kethrin, whose voice cracked like breaking glass. "Those aren't ships. Those are floating weapons platforms designed by madmen." The human fleet moved with predatory grace that made Vextai's skin crawl. Each vessel positioned itself with mathematical precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that could turn any approaching enemy into superheated plasma in seconds. Their formations weren't just tactical, they were artistic expressions of violence. Deadly poetry written in steel and fire, but here's the thing about desperate times: they make you grateful for monsters on your side. Even when those monsters absolutely terrify you. The flagship U.S. Retribution dominated the formation like a metallic mountain floating in space. Its hull bore the scars of a dozen major conflicts, each mark telling a story of human stubbornness and their peculiar talent for turning. Losing battles into Pyrrhic victories for their enemies. Weapon ports lined its surface, like the eyes of some primordial beast, each one capable of delivering enough destructive force to level a city. "Chancellor," his communications officer stammered, her forearms trembling as she worked the controls. "The human commander is requesting immediate contact." Should I open the channel?" Vextai straightened his ceremonial robes with hands that shook despite his best efforts to appear calm. As High Chancellor of the Galactic Council, he'd negotiated with pirates, reasoned with warlords, and faced down cosmic horrors that defied description. But none of that had prepared him for this moment, tasking humanity's deadliest killers to save civilization itself. "Open communications," he commanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and desperate hope that somehow these legendary monsters would prove to be their salvation rather than their doom. The holographic display shimmered to life. An Admiral Marcus Stone's image appeared like a vision from the Council's collective nightmares. His scarred face spoke of battles fought in the darkness between stars. Of victories won through sheer bloody-minded determination and a willingness to pay any price for success. Those cold blue eyes had seen entire worlds burn and hadn't lost a minute of sleep over it when Stone spoke. His voice carried the casual authority of a man who'd commanded fleets through the fires of hell and come out the other side, asking for more targets. "Chancellor," he said with the kind of smile that made small children hide under their beds, "we got your distress call. Point us toward whatever needs killing, and we'll handle the rest." The casual mention of slaughter, the eager anticipation of battle sent waves of primal fear through the council chamber like ripples from a dropped stone. These weren't peacekeepers arriving to negotiate a ceasefire. These weren't diplomats coming to find a peaceful solution. These were death machines forged on the most dangerous planet in known space. They were hungry for violence. Isn't it funny how quickly your opinion of someone changes when they're your only hope of survival? General Kethron leaned toward Vexti, his voice barely a whisper. "Chancellor, perhaps we should reconsider. These humans, their casualty reports from internal conflicts are classified. It's too disturbing for civilian viewing. Their own species considers their military tactics excessive and potentially war crimes." Vextai almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. The Council had spent decades debating whether humanity should even be allowed in civilized space. They'd posted warning beacons, established quarantine zones, and written treaties specifically designed to contain human aggression. Now, those same humans were their last hope against extinction. Admiral Stone Vextai managed, fighting to keep his voice steady, while his species' survival instincts screamed at him to run. The Void Swarm has broken through our final defensive perimeter. They're estimated to reach the core worlds within 72 standard hours. Our casualties number in the hundreds of billions. Stone's expression didn't change. But something shifted behind those predators' eyes. Something that made Vexte grateful he was on humanity's side this time. Understood, Chancellor. Transmit all tactical data, enemy movement patterns, and the locations of any survivors who need evacuation. We'll handle the rest. The efficiency of it was almost as terrifying as the violence it promised. About rules of engagement. No requests for diplomatic authorization. No concerns about collateral damage or civilian casualties. Just a simple acknowledgement and the implicit understanding that whatever stood between humanity and their objective would cease to exist. But wait, here's where things get really interesting. As the human fleet began to move deeper into Council space, their formations shifted with fluid precision that spoke of centuries of warfare and tactical evolution. Each ship knew its role, each captain understood their mission, and every crew member was prepared to die rather than fail. This wasn't just a military force, this was a weapon system with a collective consciousness devoted to the art of destruction. Chancellor Stone continued, his image flickering slightly as the Retribution's massive engines began to power up. You should know that once we engage the swarm, we'll be fighting by human rules. It means no surrender, no mercy, and no half measures. We'll either save your civilization, or we'll die trying. There won't be a middle ground. The words hit the council chamber like physical blows. Every civilized species understood the concept of proportional response, of measured retaliation, of victory achieved through minimal necessary force. Humans apparently understood only total war and complete annihilation of their enemies. As the communication ended and the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Vexte found himself wondering if they'd just save the galaxy or unleash something that would make the void swarm look like a minor inconvenience. The answer to that question was racing toward the front lines at faster-than-light speed, carrying enough firepower to crack planets and crewed by the descendants of apex predators who'd spent their entire evolutionary history learning new ways to kill things that tried to kill them first. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Void Swarm continued its relentless advance. It was completely unaware that it was about to discover why even nightmares had nightmares about the children of Earth. The Void Swarm poured through the Centauri sector like living nightmares given physical form, writhing masses of dark energy and corrupted matter that defied every law of physics the galaxy thought it understood.
Yes.
Their screaming ships didn't just move through space, they violated it, phasing in and out of reality like demons emerging from humanity's worst fever dreams. These weren't vessels in any traditional sense. They were manifestations of entropy itself, wielding weapons that literally tore apart the fabric of space-time and shields that absorbed the life force of entire planets like cosmic vampires feeding on civilizations. The sight of them moving through space was enough to drive lesser minds to madness. They had devoured 23 civilizations in their relentless march across the galaxy, the proud warrior race of Kethra, extinct in 6 hours. The technological marvels of the Silicon Collective, reduced to floating debris and screaming data fragments. The ancient wisdom of the Eternal Archive, consumed and twisted into something obscene that whispered secrets no living being should ever know. Nothing had been able to stop them. Every defense had crumbled. Every fleet had been annihilated. Every desperate last stand had ended in horror and silence. Then humanity arrived like avenging angels of destruction, and the universe held its breath. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly into the heart of the storm, their ships materializing in perfect attack formation while reality still rippled from their violent emergence. The UES Retribution led the charge like a spear thrust from the gods of war themselves, its massive bulk cutting through space with predatory grace that made watching admirals across the galaxy suddenly understand why humans were quarantined from polite society. But here's where things get absolutely insane. The humans didn't hesitate, didn't pause to analyze the enemy, didn't waste time on tactical assessments. They saw the cosmic horror consuming entire star systems, and their first instinct was to pick a fight with it. The first volley from Stone's flagship was a thing of terrible beauty. Antimatter torpedoes traveling at significant fractions of light. Speed slammed into 3 swarm cruisers simultaneously, each impact releasing enough energy to power a small star. The exotic matter that comprised the swarm ships simply ceased to exist, transformed into pure energy that painted space in colors that had no names. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. All ships, weapons free. Admiral Stone's voice cut through the chaos of battle like a plasma blade through butter, his words carrying the accumulated fury of humanity's bloodiest conflicts. These things want to consume the universe. Let's show them what happens when they mess with Deathworlders. What happened next would be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 years, assuming there was anyone left alive to study it. The human fleet attacked with the savage coordination of apex predators, who'd spent millions of years learning how to kill things bigger and nastier than themselves. Destroyer squadrons dove through swarm formations like sharks through schools of fish, or pulse cannons tearing through dark matter shields that had previously been considered impenetrable. Battlecruisers unleashed salvos of kinetic projectiles that hit with the force of small asteroids, turning the swarm's exotic technology into cosmic scrap metal. But wait, here's the part that made even hardened veterans question their sanity. Where the Council forces had tried to match the swarms exotic technology with equally exotic countermeasures, humans simply brought more raw violence than the universe could handle. No fancy energy manipulation, no attempts to phase match their dimensional frequencies. Just good old-fashioned human ingenuity applied to the ancient art of making their enemies stop existing, Captain. Emma Parker's destroyer U.S. Thunder demonstrated this philosophy perfectly, as a swarm dreadnought phased partially out of reality to avoid incoming fire. Parker didn't try to match its dimensional tricks. Instead, she ordered her crew to target the space where the ship would rematerialize and filled it. With enough nuclear warheads to sterilize a small moon, the swarm ship reappeared directly into what could only be described as a miniature. That's for calling us monsters, you interdimensional freaks. Parker's voice crackled over the comm channels, her laughter carrying the kind of joy that came from finally getting to unleash humanity's carefully contained aggression on something that truly deserved it. The battle raged across 3-dimensional planes simultaneously. Swarm entities that existed partially outside normal space-time found themselves facing weapons that didn't care about the laws of physics. Human crews who'd grown up on a planet where everything tried to kill them daily weren't particularly impressed by cosmic horrors that bent reality to their will, after all. What's a little dimensional manipulation compared to surviving Australian wildlife? Commander David Chen's carrier group provided a perfect example of human tactical innovation. Faced with swarm fighters that could phase through solid matter, Chen didn't waste time developing exotic countermeasures. Instead, he launched his fighter squadrons with proximity-triggered antimatter mines, turning the space around his carrier into a 3-dimensional minefield where phasing through solid objects just meant detonating more explosives. The results were as beautiful as they were terrifying. But here's what nobody expected. Not the Council, not the Swarm, and probably not even the humans themselves. As the battle intensified, the Void Swarm began to adapt, their ships growing new weapons and defenses in real time as they learned from each human attack. The dark entities that commanded the swarm possessed intelligence beyond mortal comprehension, capable of analyzing and countering any threat within minutes. Unfortunately for them, they'd never encountered a species whose primary survival strategy was get more creative at violence faster than evolution can keep up. Every time the swarm adapted to human weapons, the humans simply invented new ways to kill them. Antimatter not working. Try black hole generators, reality manipulation, getting annoying. Launch missiles that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Enemy shields absorbing energy weapons. Switch to kinetic projectiles fired from railguns powered by fusion reactors. The swarm's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and evolve, had never faced humanity's greatest strength, their absolute refusal to fight fair, follow rules, or accept that anything was impossible when it came to finding new ways to win. As Admiral Stone watched his fleet tear through enemies that had consumed civilizations older than human writing, he allowed himself a grim smile. The galaxy had spent decades debating whether humanity was too dangerous for civilized space. Today, they were about to get their answer on the cosmic horrors. Trying to devour the universe were going to be the ones paying the price for that knowledge. But deep in the heart of the swarm, something ancient and malevolent was taking notice of these new predators. And it was beginning to understand that perhaps it had finally found prey that could bite back. The question was, would humanity's legendary stubbornness be enough to save the galaxy, or had they just painted a target on Earth that would attract horrors beyond imagination? In the aftermath of the greatest battle the galaxy had ever witnessed, had redefined everything the universe thought it knew about humanity. The smoking ruins of the void swarm drifted through space like cosmic tombstones, their dark matter holes twisted into impossible shapes that hurt to look at directly. The very fabric of reality bore scars from the conflict tears in space-time that would take decades to heal, if they ever did. But here's what nobody expected from the galaxy's most feared predators: human medics. Moved through the wreckage with surprising gentleness, treating wounded aliens with the same care they'd show their own species. The sight was so surreal, it made hardened veterans question everything they believed about the children of Earth. These same humans who'd just unleashed enough violence, 2 crack moons were now carefully bandaging the wounds of Council soldiers, sharing their medical supplies without being asked, and risking their lives to pull survivors from damaged ships that could explode at any moment. Chancellor Vextai floated through the corridors of the UES Retribution like a ghost, his 3 hearts still hammering from witnessing humanity's brutal efficiency in combat. The human flagship bore the scars of battle hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, corridors filled with the acrid smell of overloaded weapon systems, and crew members who moved with the exhausted satisfaction of predators who'd successfully defended their territory. He found Admiral Stone standing alone on the observation deck, silhouetted against the starfield where the remnants of an interdimensional nightmare drifted in the cosmic wind. The man who just commanded the most devastating military campaign in galactic history looked almost peaceful. His weathered hands rested on the viewport's edge as he watched human and Council ships working together to clear the debris field. "Admiral," Vextai said softly, his voice barely disturbing the silence that seemed to press down on them like the weight of what they'd all survived. Stone didn't turn around immediately. When he finally acknowledged the Chancellor's presence, his voice carried a weariness that spoke of too many battles and too many friends lost along the way. "Chancellor, how are your people holding up?" The simple question hit Vextai like a physical blow. After everything that had happened, the terror, the violence, the casual way humans had torn through cosmic horrors, Stone's first concern was for the welfare of aliens who'd spent decades treating his species like dangerous animals. "Your species terrifies me," Vextai admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. His voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear that made his translator struggle to find equivalent concepts. Such incredible capacity for destruction. And yet mercy, how do you reconcile these contradictions? Stone's weathered face softened slightly as he watched a human engineering crew helping to repair a damaged Council cruiser. Their crews working side by side despite the language barriers and fundamental biological differences. "Chancellor, we came from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. Predators that could tear us apart with their bare claws. Diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Natural disasters that could level mountains. Hell, even. The weather on our planet wanted us dead." He paused, his blue eyes reflecting the distant stars like chips of ice that had somehow learned to feel compassion. "We became what we needed to become to survive. We learned to be more violent than the violence that threatened us, more stubborn than the disasters that tried to break us, and more adaptable than the changes that could have killed us. But here's the part that changed everything. the part that would reshape galactic politics for the next 1,000 years, Stone gestured toward. The space where human and council ships now patrolled together, their formation lights creating a constellation of hope against the darkness. But we also learned something those swarm bastards never could. True strength isn't about destroying everything in your path. It's about choosing what's worth protecting and being ready to become monsters to protect it. The words hung in the recycled air between them like a revelation that rewrote the fundamental laws of the universe. Vextai had spent his entire career studying warfare, diplomacy, and the complex dynamics of interspecies relations. He'd never encountered a concept quite like this power wielded not for conquest but for protection. The Council spent decades debating whether your species should be allowed in civilized space, Vextai said, his voice barely above a whisper. We called you too dangerous, too unpredictable, too willing to use violence as a first resort. Stone finally turned to face him, and the Chancellor saw something in those predators' eyes that made him understand why humans had not only survived on their nightmare world, but had thrived there. It wasn't just intelligence or adaptability or even their legendary stubbornness. It was something deeper, a fundamental understanding that sometimes the only way to preserve life was to become very, very good at ending it. You were right about us being dangerous, Stone said with a smile that could have belonged to either a saint or a demon. We are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But what you never understood was why that makes us the best protectors you could ask for. Observation deck fell silent, except for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Outside, the cleanup continued. Human soldiers and council engineers worked together to clear wreckage, rescue survivors, and begin the long process of rebuilding what the swarm had tried to destroy. But wait, here's the twist that nobody saw coming.
Not even Stone himself.
They watched the joint operations unfold. Vextai realized that humanity's quarantine hadn't been about protecting the galaxy from human aggression. It had been about protecting humanity from having to choose between civilization and survival. The Council had forced Earth's children to remain on their violent world, where they'd continued to evolve and adapt and become more dangerous with each passing generation. Admiral Vextai said slowly, "What happens now? Will your species accept integration into galactic society?" Stone's expression turned thoughtful as he considered the question that would determine the future of both. Their civilizations. That depends, Chancellor. Are you ready for neighbors who keep loaded weapons in every room but will share their last meal with a stranger? Can the galaxy handle a species that treats war like an art form but considers protecting the innocent a sacred duty? The Void Swarm's reign of terror had ended, their nightmare ships reduced to cosmic dust and fading memories. The galaxy had learned a truth that would echo through the ages. Sometimes, to defeat the darkness, you needed creatures born in darkness, who chose to walk in the light. Humanity, the most dangerous species in the universe, had proven once again why even monsters feared the children of Earth. But more importantly, they'd shown that being dangerous didn't mean being evil, and that the capacity for violence could coexist with the choice to be gentle. As the human fleet prepared to escort Council survivors back to safety, one question remained unanswered. Would the galaxy finally accept that its greatest protectors were the same species they'd spent decades fearing? The answer would reshape the future of every civilization among the stars. But for now, it was enough that the darkness had been pushed back by creatures who understood that true monsters were those who destroyed without purpose while true. Heroes were those who destroyed only to protect what they loved. The end.